Dear Traditional Africa, today I bring you the South African circumcision. The male initiation ceremony of the Xhosa people of South Africa, Owoluko, is an age-old tradition. It's a mystical, secretive ritual that occurs far away from the eyes of the public. The only information non-participants and non-family members ever have about it is the disturbing death toll from what the newspapers call botched circumcisions. As a result, there is pressure from some quarters to ban the custom altogether, and, as winter approaches and a new crop of Abakwetha are preparing to go to the mountain to earn the right to call themselves men, the controversy is bound to resurface. But, having spent the 2014 winter season filming a documentary with 3 Abakwetha, I can testify that the ceremony is a test of courage and is much more than a circumcision ritual. Banning it is a ridiculous notion. Owoluko is fundamental to Xhosa life. I think banning it is a ridiculous notion. Owoluko is fundamental to Xhosa life, but it's not a rigid, inflexible ritual. It changes with the times. For example, the Abakwetha no longer actually go to the mountains, but somewhere close by yet cut off from the village. And the seclusion period is much shorter. When 63-year-old Bangail Pakamile went through initiation, he was away for 6 months, and his younger brothers, who are in their 40s, spent 3 months in seclusion. Now their sons Sandile and Anati and their close friend Lulama will spend 1 month in the bush. There are 2 seasons for the Owoluko, winter and summer. Despite village elders murmuring, "We had it harder," the month in the bush is not easy, particularly in winter. Every boy knows the inherent dangers. The number of deaths mounts up on the front pages like a recurring nightmare. Indeed, by the time Sandile, Nathi and Lulama had safely stepped out as new men, 39 initiates had died in the Eastern Cape, and more than 300 had been hospitalized. The number of deaths mount up on the front pages like a recurring nightmare. The initiates, known collectively as Abakwetha or individually as Umkwetha, surrender their names. Their clothes are shredded in the days leading up to their exclusion, and they carry a short stick with a white cloth tied to one end. Women cut dry grass for thatching while men chop down flexible saplings. Dressed in traditional clothing, the adults construct a domed dwelling called Iboma that will serve as the home for the Abakwetha. Each of the customs is intricate and detailed, but there is no instruction booklet, so the men constantly remind each other of the many important details as the preparation continues. The structure is surrounded by a symbolic barrier of thorn branches with a single entry and exit point. One member of the construction crew accidentally stepped across the thorn branches and was scolded by one of the elders. His indiscretion was probably due to ceremonial brandy rather than a failure to adhere to traditional guidelines. Alcohol has woven its way into every stage of the ceremony. Where traditional beer known as Umkombothi might have once served a roll, brandy and castle lager have been added. I find myself included in this custom, and a bottle of brandy is requested from me. All those present contribute in one way or another. The greatest contribution comes from the parents of the initiate. By my calculations, it costs somewhere in the region of ZAR 10,000 $900 US to put a boy through the initiation. There are cows and at least 2 goats to slaughter, traditional blankets, a month's worth of food, traditional surgeon fees, overseer fees, and food and drinks for parties. And the brand new smart clothes worn at the end of the month can cost in excess of ZAR 2,000 alone. It's a significant burden on already financially stretched families. Buttons with no holes. John Pakamile, a 20-year veteran overseer of the initiates, tells me that the early white settlers brought 2
things to the Xhosa people: alcohol and buttons with no holes. I sat dumbfounded, pondering buttons with no holes. John laughed at me and said, "We had everything we needed. Fresh water from the rivers, wild animals to hunt, livestock and gardens. What use did we have for money? For rural people far away from industrial and commercial centers, making buttons with no holes is a constant struggle." But despite the economic hardships, many live full and dynamic lives filled with humor, warmth, love and generosity. It is a close community, and participation in the Owoluko involves every member of the wider family group and friends. While elders ensure practices are correctly adhered to, 5 or 6 younger boys will be in constant attendance at the Abakwetha. Delighting in their role as Nkalathi, the young boys chop wood from the nearby forest and begin making a pile of firewood outside the entrance to the Iboma, to comply with regulations governing traditional circumcision, initiates must be at least 18 years of age and must present written parental or guardian consent to the Central Office of Records for initiates. The initiates, the traditional surgeon, and the overseer must all be registered and have the necessary permits. There are actually traditional police who visit during the season demanding the official papers, which are kept in a plastic sleeve and tucked up into the thatching of the iboma. Failure to comply may result in fines and/or prison. At the Office of Records, we met with the traditional surgeon. Although the circumcision is still done with an assegai, spear, I am assured by John that hygiene standards are rigorous. For 2 initiates, the spear has 2 sharp blades, one on each end. For 3 initiates, the surgeon brings 2 spears. The surgeon is an outsider who only appears for the removal of foreskins. He attends to all the initiates in the area and, thankfully, is not a participant in alcohol-related rituals at any time.
Going to Yo the mountain, when the big day arrives for Sandile, Anati, and Lalama, there is a huge gathering at the family homestead. The Abaquatha are stripped naked and ushered inside the family kraal, traditionally a collection of huts within an enclosure. They sit on the bare ground draped in gray blankets while a cow and goat are slaughtered. There is a great deal of alcohol consumed by those in attendance, especially the old men who sit looking on from a semicircle of chairs. Axes and knives flash in the winter sun as the animals are butchered, cooked in big pots, and then rapidly consumed by all the while, in the swirl of dust, blood and noise, the Abaquatha sit quietly with heads bowed in submission while attending men explain what is to come and what is expected of them. Their heads and pubic hair are shaved. They are offered choice cuts of goat and cow and encouraged to fill up. They find the surgeon waiting for them in the bush with spear in hand. At dusk, all the men rise and encircle the Abaquatha, singing an immensely powerful song. They slowly shuffle and dance along the road while the entire village ululates and shouts. The energy in the group feels edgy and somewhat dangerous. The men carry an assortment of sticks, and small scuffles break out as they near the edge of the village. Suddenly the 3 Abaquatha drop their blankets and run for their lives as the men tear after them, shouting and wielding their sticks. It must have their teenage hearts beating out of their chests. Having escaped one terror, they find the surgeon waiting for them in the bush with a spear in hand. They sit down with legs apart, and a rapid single cut from the assegai removes the foreskin. The boys make no sound, they don't flinch, stoic bravery being an important part of this and the hurdles to come. Their wounds are dressed with a medicinal plant called iziqui and tied with a leather thong around their waists. There is only a small group in attendance, and in the
children in Sydney. We all laugh. They see Charlie's 4th birthday cake and are stunned as if they have never seen anything so amazing. Boys, 2 men, John and his youngest son, cut palm leaves that they bend into 3 crowns for the initiates as a symbol that their homecoming is near. Their heads are freshly shaved, and John instructs them to shave the head of one of the Encalathi, 10-year-old Athaidi. It is an honor for him, as he will serve as a mascot over the coming 2 days. He will lead the procession back to the village and participate as if he were an Umquatha himself. On their final day in the bush, the Abaquatha and Encalathi work hard, chopping a huge stockpile of wood. Men build a bonfire outside the iboma and play a traditional initiation game called Saya through the night. It's played with short and long twigs concealed in each hand, accompanied by what seem to be impersonations of animals, and spirits with strange clicks and squeals. In the firelight, the wild gesticulations, explosive laughter and warmth between the men of all ages is magical. How long have men played Saya by the fire under the spectacular African night sky? At dawn, John leads the Abaquatha to the river. Before entering the water, they pay homage to the ancestors by daubing river clay on their foreheads. Then they stand knee-deep and carefully wash all remnants of white clay from their bodies. In the cold morning light, they head back to camp naked. Bangile, the eldest of the Pacamile family, covers their bodies in butter. He then covers them in colored blankets, leaving them just a tiny peephole through which they hold their black sticks. Forming a single line behind young Athaidi, they shuffle away from the iboma, where the men break into song and set the hut alight. Within minutes it is a fireball, all the trappings of the last month incinerated. The Abaquatha do not look back as they walk on, followed by dozens of men, young and old. As they move through the village, women,
"Oh, you're late? and small children join the group. When they reach the Pacamile homestead, the women beat sticks onto a corrugated iron sheet, the boys sit outside the kraal, the little mascot Athaidi at one end and an older man at the other, representing the generations. Seated around the boys are more than a dozen old men. Each of them stands to impart words of wisdom to the Abuquaitha. After each speech, a symbolic offering of 1 or 2 rand coins represents the first step on a much larger journey. All I can think about is buttons with no holes. After the speeches, the initiates are moved inside, surrounded by friends and siblings. 2 girls enter and transform the boys by painting their faces with red ochre and wrapping their heads with black and white cloth. From being Amaquaitha, the initiates have become Amakuala. Finally, they begin to relax their stoic demeanor. The following day, after a hearty breakfast of soup, vegetables, and meat, the 3 Amakuala are escorted to Lalama's rural home, a beautiful spot overlooking a pristine valley. As a thank you to the overseer and the people of Xhosa village, the family slaughter a pig for their guests and mark the occasion with more brandy and beer. While family members sit in the morning sun, men butcher the pig and cook it on the open fire. The Amakuala sit in the grass, and Lalama sees his siblings for the first time in a month. At a certain point, John ushers him into a hut. Lalama washes and bathes his whole body while standing in a large enamel dish. He finally reappears in brand new Western clothes. Lalama's face is then smeared with a brownish paste to mark the final stage of the transition. The entire group then travels back to Xhosa village. Sandile and Nathi wash and dress in smart flat caps, jackets, pressed trousers, and leather-soled shoes. Bangile, the oldest man, embraces them and warmly slaps them on the back. There are brief speeches and ceremonial brandy shots, and it is finally over.
They walk out of the hut and take their first steps on the long journey of life as men. It's hard to be a man. Not once did I witness fighting, drinking, or disobedience from the Abuquaitha. Likewise, the adults in direct supervisory roles performed their duties skillfully and responsibly. Because the tradition isn't written down or uniform across the Xhosa nation, I am sure the ceremony has many variations. I suspect the deaths and mutilations may result from badly run initiation schools. Perhaps because I have witnessed a school run well, I am biased, but people from my culture circumcise babies and voluntarily risk their lives with breast augmentation and nose jobs. We are quick to judge traditional cultures and even quicker to forget our similarities. I love the warmth and comfort shown by the community of men. I have never sat in communion around so many fires and seen children and adults work together so effortlessly for a common cause. All had their role, and all had respect for each other. I was shown incredible kindness and understanding and was never questioned about my presence or purpose. They trusted me. The long ceremony gave me the time to ponder my own role as a man, something Westerners like me blunder into via alcohol-fueled 21st birthday parties. When I asked the Abuquaitha why they had to go through all this, they replied, "It's hard to be a man. You can't buy or be given it, you must be it. You have to endure pain, hunger and hardship. When times get tough in your life, you know you got through your initiation, so you can get through whatever challenge you face." Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.